click record. I see.
Okay, I've got it. I think record to
Okay.
the cloud, and then what we did last time, I realized if you don't have a Dropbox account, or not, I'm sorry, not a Dropbox, a Zoom account, you can't get access. So Osami was able to translate it or transfer it to a private YouTube channel. So we'll do that. We'll transfer it to a private YouTube and just send everyone the YouTube link. But I'm sorry, John, we didn't mean to interrupt if you wanted to carry on the coastal surge.
Just to close it out, I mean, the one sort of lens on our work at Green Roots that we do not have is indigenous and traditional knowledge systems. That is something we would like to bring into this, and we would like to build up relationships with some of the different groups that are here locally in Massachusetts, and to make these connections. And I think some of the things that Leslie has talked about in terms of traditional uses of different plant resources and things would be something we'd like to, from the sort of environmental standpoint of ecosystem services and such. This is a whole realm of ecosystem services that are intricately linked to traditional lifeways and uses of the habitat. So we could incorporate that aspect. And the other aspect of it is also thinking about not just talking to coastal engineers and ecologists when we're doing restoration work, but talking to traditional peoples and hearing how their ancestors would have used these resources and how they use the resources today, and how can we begin to incorporate some of those understandings into this changing, the climate change sort of context, the lessons learned from ancestors to modern day, not just Western mindset of restoration. And so that's the Mill Creek is one area, but we're also flexible enough. We have a few different projects that are going on, so that if something were to shift, I think there are other areas that we could also move to. But most of this would be, I think, needs to critically be aligned with Leslie and what's going on elsewhere in Massachusetts.
Yeah, and then the possibility of having two sites as well is maybe not such a bad thing, because it would help us draw out that urban regional difference, which is important to this grant effort as well. So that's what we're thinking for the pilot. Why don't we go on to the next regional team? Osama, I think you were able to meet this morning with the Louisiana team. Do you want to kind of summarize what you all discussed and what that site project might be?
I'm happy to do an outline. I know Samantha and Shirley and Rosina and Chief Sherrill are all on the call too, so I can feel free to jump in if there's anything that I'm missing. But we had a really fabulous discussion this morning. Let me just pull up my notes. So we didn't land on a site for a pilot project, but we did land on some really cool concrete ideas for what we'd hope this pilot project and community assessment could queue up, which is the idea of kind of a coastal master plan from an Indigenous perspective, and really centering kind of tribal needs and also, like you're saying, Janelle, strengths, but not just, I think, focused on climate, like direct vulnerability to climate, but also what potential effects might there be of some proposed mitigation activities, such as carbon capture, which the state of Louisiana is proposing as part of their climate initiative. And also, I think, other kinds of pressures created by development, which is being undertaken right now, such as the kind of like fancy fishing camps that are being placed, and other infrastructure to support them, even though that same infrastructure was not offered to the existing tribal residents of those areas. So just kind of this idea of a kind of comprehensive coastal master plan in the long term. And then we also talked a lot about feeling very excited about Chief Sherrill's new role on a new state task force that's working on like a climate initiative, and she can say more, I'm sure, but she's on the equity committee, and there's a lot of other state agencies there. So some resonance with some positive signals we've gotten in Massachusetts about the state agencies actually taking tribal voices more strongly into consideration. And actually, we were talking a lot about how can we position Chief Sherrill and other folks to be really strong and supported advocates in these new opportunities they're getting to plug into state policy. So I think, yeah, anything else that we didn't talk about? We also talked about foodways, and I'd welcome Shirley or whoever else wants to share some of that kind of conflict around shrimping and some of the ideas about, I heard like bulkheading and floating gardens and all these really interesting concepts being mentioned, but don't know that much about what that could look like. So anybody who wants to jump in, please. Oh, and Nathan's here. Great. I was just summarizing our conversation this morning.
Yeah, sorry I'm late.
No problem. Shirley, I see you unmuted. Did you want to jump in with any additional color?
We have Elder Rosina and Chief Sherrill here, so I think my role is to sit and to support what they want to say. Either one of you, Rosina, Sherrill?
Leader Rosina, would you like to speak?
You can go ahead and tell them about what you're working on with the climate initiative task force, and kind of tie it into what Samu was just saying that would happen today. And Samantha, I think you have stuff to say.
Okay, so of course in Louisiana we have Governor Edwards, John Bell Edwards, who created the Climate Initiatives Task Force. Now that task force is made up of a lot of the big departments, for example, like Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, Department of Transportation, just Department of Energy. So these are going to be a lot of the departments that deal with basically the whole infrastructure of the state, right? Economic development, the whole 9 yards. The goal of the task force currently is to get to zero net emissions by the year 2050. Now they have advisory groups, and one of those advisory groups is, of course, the economic advisory group, which I've been asked to sit on as well. And what these advisory groups are going to do is gather the information to be able to meet said goal of getting to net zero emissions by 2050. The task force itself, which I am a voting member of, will then look at that information and create a plan of action and draft a report based on the different findings by the different advisory groups. And we only have 15 months to do that. So no pressure, but it's a good thing that we are now having a seat at the table, especially in regards to a lot of the big decisions that are being made. However, we need to make sure that we have all of the knowledge available when it comes to the different types of things that they're proposing, such as this carbon capture, right? I've heard of carbon capture. I'm a little familiar with what it's about, but knowing all of the intimate details about it, I do not, right? And it's going to be crucial for us to have all of the information to be able to make good informed decisions, especially considering the long histories of, you know, what has been, we'll say, done to our communities without our knowledge and our input. You know, so we're seeing some changes. We are now invited, but we still need to make sure that we have all of the knowledge available to us to be able to make really good informed decisions for our future. Yeah, so that's a new development for us here in Louisiana. You know, so of course our team is going to be working on that to make sure that we can create good positive progress.
Yeah. One thing that was mentioned, and I restated that from a previous meeting from today, we had talked about the difference between our communities surviving rather than thriving. And a lot of the proposed projects that the government and its actors have proposed for that would impact our communities, you know, it would enable us to continue to survive, but not to thrive as we once did. So, and Chief Sorrell, you said it in the meeting earlier that you felt that maybe the invitation to sit at the table was just something that they were trying to be PC, you know, and not really expecting you to have much to contribute. So that goes back to, you know, the information gathering that we need to do to support her being at that table. You know, we do not want to, I say, support this new initiative for carbon capture without looking at the long-term picture and seeing what those outcomes and what the worst case scenario would be, because we've been impacted by so many things, you know, just adding one more layer, you know, would not be something that, you know, we want to stand behind and champion. So we need to be informed, we need to be active, we need to take action when we can, but informed action. We need to be a true collaborative player. And Nathan also said that because of the I guess the climate of the temperature of what's happening in our nation today, in, you know, in the whole political, for want of a better word, things that are happening, we need to take this opportunity to flex our collective strength as, you know, indigenous populations, you know, being informed, working with the science, whatever, and being seen as a true powerhouse where our knowledge is respected and can stand in conjunction with everything else, and be truly appreciated for what it is and respected for what it is. So now is the time, and we have to take that opportunity to capitalize on, you know, everything that's going on, to make sure that we are seen and heard, and that the things that we advocate for can be replicated and built on for the future. Because what are we working for? We're working to better our futures, our presence and our futures, something that, you know, can be built on going forward. So those are the things that, you know, we were discussing, and hopefully we can, you know, engage and be a true collaborative partner with whatever's happening in our territories, to make sure that, you know, the future is not as burdensome as our past.
So now I'd like to tag on to those two comments. Let's sort of get serious for a moment. The tribes know how to organize. The tribes know all about TEK. Why should the tribes be partnering with MIT? For the very reason that Rosina and Sherelle just said. You have the knowledge to support the tribe's growth in these goals that the state has, that the tribes don't know whether they will harm them or benefit them. It's real simple.
Samantha, were you gonna comment as well?
I just wanted to add in that Nathan also had a wonderful idea of many of us that are partnering in the Louisiana hub to really get to the heart of doing a in-depth literature review and bringing a lot of that knowledge on carbon capture and any of the other things that Chief Sherelle will need to really be provided as much knowledge as possible to go forth and really have those Indigenous voices be heard and have that traditional knowledge impact policy change. So one way that I think I would absolutely love for Dillard to be a part of is doing a lot of that literature review legwork. And I would definitely use that as a teaching moment with all my students, where they could have that background and understanding and get involved in that aspect as well.
I think that sounds fantastic. And Nathan, did you want to comment as well?
Thanks. I don't know if I really have anything to add. I think, I think that to me, like, yeah, we should just figure out. I think the thing that was bothering me, there was something bothering me. There's always something bothering me, and it is the idea that a vulnerability assessment or a needs assessment or a community engagement process or whatever the word is, public participation would, and especially vulnerability and needs assessments would solely be another extractive process where the community members who all of our work is intended to support would actually be asked to do a lot of work in thinking about the ways in which they imagine themselves to be vulnerable or not. And so I think in that comment that Samantha brought up, I was thinking just that one of the vulnerabilities that we know exist is the unknown when it comes to implementing these new programs. And so if we as scholars can use the resources at our hands to look up the risks, and Janelle, you just typed in some like in the chat, but like look up some of the risks to whatever, and Samantha was, I think, really importantly brought up that it's not just like carbon capture, and obviously carbon capture is important on some level. Like we'll need to fight climate change, you need to take carbon out of the atmosphere, right? But like just getting into, I think the devil's in the details, and so we need to be able to do some of the research and not just for Chief Sherelle on this task force, though that's important, very important, but also for the FPCC's broader agenda setting in terms of a coastal master plan, or is how we were talking about it earlier, but whatever, just like agenda setting for the future to ensure the continuation of the tribe's traditional lifeways. Because that needs to be, in my view, based on what I've heard, like that's what the goal is. The goal is not necessarily harmonizing traditional and STEM knowledge. I mean, if the STEM knowledge is harmful, then we don't want that to continue. And so I think really it should be about elevating the traditional lifeways and maybe understanding the STEM knowledge in such a way that that we can do that amplification in a way in which the developers and the policymakers will be more either receptive or forced to honor an indigenous future to the coast here.
Well, thank you all. I do. I love the idea of the coastal master plan as the long-term goal. And then I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that Chief Sherrell's involvement with this task force is an opportunity. And it sounds like the timelines are relatively comparable as well for that to be the pilot project, that using this network to support her and the other tribes engagement and elevating their knowledge and kind of, directing that around assessing the decisions that are being made in or by that task force, and supporting the advocacy of the tribes and of Chief Sherrell with the best available traditional knowledge as well as STEM knowledge or STEAM knowledge is kind of the pilot project for your region. And I think that would sit very well if everybody's on board with that. I think it would also balance maybe different approaches in the other regions. And then so we're sort of showing little bit or little pieces of what could eventually be a much bigger effort and a bigger grant. So does that sound like, does my summary of what you all are saying, does that sound accurate?
I have a thought. I think what you're saying, one thing I don't want to do is like put a ton of pressure on you, Chief Sherrell, in this like new role and everything. And so I feel like the issue here is obviously that Chief Sherrell has this amazing opportunity, but then also there's like, there's a question mark as to like what's possible there. But I think the real issue here, at least that I see, is that like there are all these new things going on, and it's not just at the state level, it's at the federal government level as well. And so the question of how do you ensure an indigenous-led sustainable agenda, or the continuation of traditional lifeways and indigenous communities on the coast needs to be asked. Because if you're not asking that question, which none of the state planners, or as far as we know, like none of the federal, like, there's no federal plan for ensuring that Grand Bayou has a future on the coast. And so if you don't have a plan for it, then you're not prioritizing it. And so I think the thing for us is there's a new administration that cares about climate change and equity, supposedly. There's a new, and they do probably, they definitely do more than the last one. And so I think like there's that. Then there's the state work of the climate task force. And the CPRA is going to have their next coastal master plan, and they've gotten some criticism for not including the work that Lowlander and the FPCC has been doing in terms of, or beginning with backfilling in a way that honors the traditional lands of the indigenous communities. And so I just think like there's a shakeup happening, and there's a lot of creativity and innovation. And we've seen with Ile de Jean Charles how badly innovation can go. And so how do we set the agenda so that indigenous futures in coastal Louisiana is prioritized?
I like that. That's really, really clear. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, it is a great question. It is something that this grant and a kind of early planning effort could try to do. And I think, I don't know that you're looking for an answer, Nathan, so much as posing the question But I think of at least two things, and one is kind of helping Chief Sherrill to elevate the power of her network and to make sure in these meetings where she's at the table that it's clear that what she is conveying is not just her voice, it is the voice of her people or peoples. And then the second is that the network can help her assessing from a variety of different knowledges and disciplines the kinds of questions that she might have, like so providing like around carbon capture and sequestration, we could provide a little summary report that she goes into these meetings armed with, so that that she's like equipped and she's ready to defend whatever perspective she and her people might be bringing to that meeting. Is that kind of like, so that that could be the function of this setup. And I think it is, it's testing and it's trying to develop another arm of what we were hoping this grant, which would eventually be beyond just education research, it would be the policy advocacy.
Just to add to that, Janelle, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of what I'm hearing too is that the idea with the coastal plan is that, you're use the metaphor like being at the table, but I think the only real way to strengthen your position at the table is to also improve away from the table. So, in terms of what kinds of planning and articulation the tribes have done for themselves, a lot of the work that I used to do with Larry Susskind was about kind of understanding what is the interaction between those two things, and when do you choose to come to the table, and how do you improve your position by working to build a coalition of folks. And we talked about that a little bit in the call too, in terms of in the longer term, how can we kind of find solidarity with some of the African-American communities in certain areas of Louisiana that have also been asked to carry a huge amount of environmental burden.
Mm-hmm.
Is that getting at a little talk about this morning?
Yeah, I see Elder Rosina has a couple of comments in the chat, and that you're frozen. Elder Rosina, did you want to speak to those?
I'm just saying, when it comes to the government, our history, and it continues on today, we're never considered in any way that they want to do anything outright to encourage our continuation, of our lifeway in our places. And for everything that we have gained, we've had to fight for years. Whereas, other people, it's just taken for granted that it's just a part of their life and the government supports their lifeway. But for the tribal people, that's never been the way. Because of, where we are today and the opportunities that we're, I guess, having by forming this collective and connecting in solidarity with the other tribes and with this body, I think we need to, to show that our continued existence is not one from weakness, but because of the knowledge that we hold, and because we are engaged and used to the fight, that we're not going to give up. We're not going to back down. And we demand that we have a seat at the table to secure the future of our peoples and our communities. And we have, and that is not going to come from a place where we're beggars at the table, but from our power. And our power is our knowledge. Like I said, we're here and we're still here. We've been here for so many centuries. And because of all the things that have happened, we have been impacted negatively and been surviving, but we have to get out of that survival mode and get into the mode where, you know what, we're going to show you why we've managed to survive all of these centuries, why we are still indigenous in this modern age, because the strength of our people, the strength of our resolve, the strength of our knowledge, and that's what we bring to the table. And we have to incorporate that, you know, into the future policies, not only for ourselves, but the future policies that the government will have to incorporate when they deal with us on, I guess, a level of well, equity. You know, like you have something and we have something, but you know, we're not beggars at your table. You have to come to us also to see how to make your projects work or how to design them and draft them so that it can work for everybody. So I think, you know, Nathan, you said right. We have so much power and knowledge to bring to the table. We just need to amplify that and let everybody else know that this is where we're coming from, that base.
I'm going to add to that really quickly. And look, I'm extremely grateful. Lord knows we need all of the knowledge and the tools we can get, especially being in this arena now, right? Knowing the powers that be. And I guess if I had to sum it up, it's, we don't want a seat at their table. They done messed that table up. We bring in our own. And we need to show them what it's like to be at our table, because our table is all inclusive. And if there's something bad, right, we cannot create progress by causing harm to other people's. That, you know, the success of our governments and what they're doing should not come because of the oppression of a people. That is not progress. So my position in the Climate Initiatives Task Force is a temporary one. It's a good one, but it's temporary. So we have to look to what is more permanent and what we intend to build upon. And that's the work that we've been doing through First Peoples, right? All of the work that we've been doing through First Peoples involves the traditional knowledge, and it's just a wealth of information that is eminently useful and can be shared, hopefully across the globe. You know, and as we were saying this morning, you know, what we're doing in our areas could be implemented in other areas, you know, once tweaked based upon their region, right? So we have to figure out how to create that value in what we're bringing and make it in such a way that it can no longer be ignored and it influences policy decisions, you know, policy making. Because we got tons of bad policy out there. It's not helping anybody. And a lot of our work is designed to create those policy changes with everyone's well-being in mind, especially our future generations.
So, okay, so it sounds like what you're envisioning is less, well, not less, it's I think it's both support for the work of this, for amplifying and elevating the FPCC voices that will inform this task force, climate task force. But beyond that, it's creating an alternative. Right? I think that's what you're saying, is that elevating and amplifying the work that already happens in the FPCC to hold up an alternative to what the state is doing. And that could be the pilot project for the planning grant. Is that right? Chief Sherrill?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. I mean, it seems like it's going in the right direction.
Okay. All right. So what would be really useful, I think, from your group is, so Osama, I imagine you wrote up and took notes from the meeting this morning. if you could try to maybe over the weekend distill this and synthesize it into a couple paragraphs and then send it out to the Louisiana members for their review. And once everybody's kind of happy with the objective and the aim of what you would try to accomplish in the region, send it back to me. And what we're going to do is weave these sections into that first, or try to weave these sections into the first page and a half of the grant application. And then that's what we'll send that back out once we've done some work to weave it together to all of the members for review. But I really like what you guys discussed. I really like the lessons and the importance and the power of what you're saying. And I think it is really important to this effort as well. So thank you for that. Thank you, Elder Rosina and Chief Sherrill. I think this is a really promising area. And I think this is eventually where we want the bigger, this is where we want the network to go. All right, so let's turn to the Minnesota team. And I see we have, welcome Heidi. I see we have a few new members to the discussion. And Elise, I think you convened that team and maybe could do the first quick synthesis of what you guys discussed.
Well, I think Courtney is on the call, and Courtney and Joe put together a good one pager. So I might turn it over to them since they put that together.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Courtney, please.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so we talked about some things. I reached out to a couple of tribal agencies up here within the Ojibwe ceded territories in northeastern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And one of the things that they came right back with that they saw as helpful and has been on their mind is their convening of tribal leaders around the Lake Superior coastal region. One of the things that they're worried about is that the young people are kind of keying into just this gloom and doom scenario of climate change, and they would like to reach out and share with them the wisdom that's been gathered for the tribal adaptation menu that's been created from the elders from all these communities, and kind of train them in how to look at adaptation within this lens. So one of the things that they said would be great is a kind of a nice kind of convening would be to bring together tribal agency researchers, the elders from the different communities, and then students and other people to do a training around the tribal adaptation menu for other communities. And then the thoughts that we had was then the students would go using this knowledge and maybe apply what they learned for certain pressing issues from where they're from. So, we're pretty separated from what's going on down in the cities, and then from some of the other communities that are on the Mississippi River. So we were thinking, we could kind of spread this out, have a convening up here, but it would be something that everybody could then take back to their community, especially students, and lead some projects. So I don't know, Joe, I think you're on. Do you want to talk about some of the things that you had thought about with Phelan Creek and more down toward the urban area?
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. Yeah, it seems like we're starting to gel here a little bit and getting some nice connections happening. So it's been a productive week, and really appreciate, Courtney's been fantastic in facilitating some of these connections. But we're still maybe not exactly sure about a project or a site as well. I think there's a few different options out there, and we can probably settle on one. I guess we'll have to do it pretty quickly, but certainly there could be something that's up in northern Minnesota around Duluth, Cloquet, maybe Lake Itasca. That's sort of one region that's facing certain challenges around climate change. And we're thinking maybe initially that might be a space to host a workshop that uses this document. And I saw Elise put the link to it there. And this is a really impressive effort led by this Glyphwick, it's called, this Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission around the Great Lakes that have compiled a whole menu of different ways to respond to climate change using TEK really. And so thinking that we could maybe do something with a sort of training up north, and depending on budget and the scope of this proposal, maybe bringing some of that down to the Twin Cities, either to look at some projects that are happening here. There's a really interesting restoration and resilience and cultural heritage project around what's called Wakantipi in St. Paul down by the Mississippi, and this area called Lower Phelan Creek. So there's just maybe kind of parallels some of the work that Urban Roots was doing in terms of its this urban focused restoration project. And then, you know, potentially imagining some kind of on water portion of this that would be that, you know, the kind of canoe-based coming together and exploring some portion of the river, which again, there's sort of a range of options there. So there's a few different things in the works here. In terms of tying it into bigger policy issues, which I think would be great. Minnesota is, you know, does not have a climate master plan or coastal master plan, but there are things in the works, and I think maybe we might explore ways in which some of the output of these workshops might inform and get more indigenous, you know, Ojibwe and Dakota voices at the table for that. So anyhow, that's we haven't gotten to that point yet in our conversations, but I think we might be able to look forward to that maybe as an output for what we're doing. So I don't know. Others want to add in to that?
I think that covered a lot of what we talked about this week, and we can keep exploring, yeah, some of the ways to connect this to some of the policy networks that exist and ways to build that link as well. So more thoughts to come. Heidi, you might have some thoughts on that already.
Yeah, I think there are networks that we can plug into, and I think maybe part of the bigger pitch is that this is really timely because our governor has a climate task force and has convened a sub-cabinet working directly on climate and is currently outlining the priorities that the state will take on, including a climate adaptation and resiliency fund. And so this type of convening, maybe with some of those themes on how to influence, participate, lead, for the state efforts, especially where there's money being made available and decisions being made. I think there's a timeliness to this type of effort. And so there could be some framing that we use in the proposal, but also I think there's real opportunity to convene or to find ways to have some knowledge sharing with those people that either are sitting on the sub-cabinet or some of the leadership and the resiliency and action, climate action team across all state agencies. So I think the sort of time is right and the people are in place.
Sounds terrific. And I really like that you mentioned that the governor's office is doing something similar. Heidi, so I don't know, we've started to develop a policy connection in Massachusetts as well. I'm not completely aware of whether, I imagine Massachusetts may be doing something similar. I just haven't looked into it. But what we might be able to do is, after we finish this grant, I don't want to put too much on the table after we submit this application, is to write a letter from our network, from all of our organizations to the respective governors with a series of requests, pseudo demands about the inclusion of traditional ecological and indigenous knowledge into these reports that will be produced. So that's something we can consider. Osama, I don't know if you want to say something. We're meeting next week, or we set that up with Rishi and Bob, if you want to say something about that.
Yeah, we're going to be meeting with the head of the Director of Environmental Justice for the state agencies, as well as the Director of DCR, the Department of Conservation Resources, who is also, I believe, the chair of the Resilient Lands Initiative, which is a new program. And there's also a number of different adaptation funding sources, but I know that the flagship one is the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, and they have just issued, I think, their first grant to a tribal recipient this past year. So I'm sure that there's lots of ways that they could be better incorporating TEK and tribal pathways to adaptation. So yeah, anyways, we'll be having a conversation with them, and I'm hoping that we can have Leslie, and if any other folks from the Massachusetts team are particularly interested in joining that and thinking about policy pathways, then please let me know. Caroline, is that a thumbs up, like you would like to join as well? Okay.
And I see a comment from Elder Rosina about including the Indigenous people to the discussions to Joe, and just, also maybe wanting to understand for the network, and Courtney, Heidi, you might be able to fill in how engaged have the tribes been. I think one of the decisions that you all made was to make Courtney the PI for Minnesota to help start to build that bridge. But is there, Elder Rosina, are there more suggestions you would have, or does anybody have other ideas of how to, to more closely pull the Indigenous people into these discussions?
Well, I think you just need to go to where they are and find out what their protocols are, and meet with the leadership. And if they're anything like us, you will meet with a smaller group of which, you will be vetted. And I guess you can vet them at the same time, but you have to be vetted before they will introduce you to the larger body of their community. But the reason I said that, you don't want to get too far ahead in your discussions without having them, be a part of it at the beginning, because too many times things get planned and formulated, and then you're invited to come after something has already started, and it's almost like an afterthought. And so you don't want them to feel that way. And that's why I'm saying, as soon as you can get them engaged, do it. Go to where they are and make yourself known. Ask what the protocol is for having a meeting with them, set up a conversation, whatever you can do. Get it started though now.
Okay, so any other thoughts from the Minnesota team?
I think the only thing to add is I'm glad Heidi brought up the task force. One of the Fond du Lac Band's community leaders is part of that task force. So that's that's another person that will be a part of the discussions up here too. So that's also a nice connection here.
Janelle, I'm not sure that we should not be focused on the fact that all three areas appear to have climate change committees. I know that's a big bite, but I mean, if it's here now, we should have it be part of the proposal. Let's practice with it, and then get bigger for other monies.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I mean, it really isn't. It's kind of retailoring what we were thinking.
I don't mean to completely retailer, but maybe, to bring it in, because if Massachusetts, it has one as well. Is that the case?
I don't know. I haven't looked into it at all,
Okay.
Shirley, so I don't know. I imagine
right.
I imagine there's something though. We just, this meeting has just brought it to our attention.
Shame on my home state here. It needs to have one,
Yeah, so let's well, I mean, what would be nice is, and again, we are up against the wall on this grant as well, even the planning grant. So I'm going to talk to Leslie tomorrow and I'll get a better sense because she works so closely on the policy side as well. And I'll send out a summary from what I discussed with Leslie to the Massachusetts team. And, I think Courtney and Joe, you wrote up something already for the Minnesota team, which is great. Maybe if you could add a couple thoughts about how this also could work with the task force based on what we're discussing, and send that out. And I know Elise can help with that to all of your team members. And also, Courtney, if there are ways for us to, like, if it is appropriate, and this is kind of the moment we can do that, to reach out more closely to the tribes to, to kind of explain what we're trying to do. I know it's what the written pieces of this are still very rough, but just to, even if they can't formally approve it, just to, just to kind of let them know what we're thinking, and then, see if you can fill in a little bit more of that detail. Send me your team's notes as well, and we'll start to pull this together and integrate it into our first scope of work. But I think you're right, Shirley, if it does seem like there's a policy focus, and we'll try to also make this meeting with the Massachusetts policymakers happen as soon as we can to figure out if we can, fully develop that. But it does seem like a great way to use the planning grant, because then the deliverable would also be, in some sense, the, the involvement of this network, the written materials, et cetera, that are produced for these various task forces. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. I know we're moving quickly. Some people, I don't know if you can stay past 5. We usually try to run till 5:30, but the other thing that I wanted to do, so what we're going to try to do this week to convene the materials that we need, please finish these write-ups over the weekend, send them to me, and everybody can just fill in your comments. It's okay if it's rough. We'll try to weave this together into the very tight first page and a half of the proposal. The second part we're going to be working on is the next 4 components of the planning grant. And so, again, I've asked a student from my team for each section to help facilitate. And so what they're going to do is send out a poll to the members. We'll have new members for this. So let me share my screen. And I'm apologies, I may have missed some people. So if anybody's missing, we'll just, hopefully everybody has the link to this planning grant from the emails that are sent out, but we can also, I'll send this again at the end of this meeting with our notes. And so what we're going to do is we'll convene, Elise, if you can work with me on this section, that would be great. We'll convene this meeting, but we've started to break people into the different groups. So there's 4 sections that we need to do. And the first is convergent research. These are very short, they're 1 page. So again, it's not a lot of writing, but the heavy lifting is really developing the concepts and thinking about what we're accomplishing. And so for this, I thought Leslie, she's been doing a lot of work on this. Erin, you had mentioned, is Erin on the call? Erin may not be on the call. Yeah, I need to talk with Erin and see if she wants to be on this group or on a different one. Is Jonathan's not on the call. I was thinking Jonathan would be good on this group, and then Elise. And so we'll convene a meeting with this group early, maybe Monday, Tuesday of next week, and meet to discuss and start to flesh in these points. And so what I've done is gone through all of the requirements on convergence and the history of this within NSF, and put together kind of our template for what we'll fill in for this 1 page. So the first is to situate convergence. And I think this grant is so well suited to this. So it's a vexing, complex problem focusing on societal need. And what we'll do is just flesh out what we think that is. And I think, we can scope out from climate change through this historical inequities and into the specifics of building a more just and equitable adaptation framework that elevates and amplifies traditional knowledges and lifeways. Then the research dimension, this is research driven by a specific compelling problem. So we explain what that problem is. And to some extent, Leslie's logic model already does this. identify the deep scientific question, identify the pressing societal need. And then the second component of it is deep integration, talk about how there will be convergence of theories, of methods, data, research communities, languages, and I've added to this lifeways. So I think what's fantastic about this grant is, well, or not, maybe not fantastic, but what is fantastic about our take on it is that this grant isn't even, they're thinking of convergence as just interdisciplinarity. It's just bringing biologists and engineers and policymaker or public, public policy scholars to work together. I think they haven't even gotten to the point where they're realizing that there are different forms of knowledge and that those need to be integrated as well. And so I feel like with this, what we're trying to accomplish with this network, we are taking it that step further. So it will explain the intermingling of knowledge communities, languages, and lifeways. And, I know in a lot of the tribal discussions that have come up, languages are really important. And I think that's, absolutely going to be a piece of this. How we might establish new frameworks, paradigms, and disciplines out of this work. And again, I think for these sections, it is speaking to some extent past the planning grant and to what we eventually want to accomplish. And then how and why the grant activity could create sustained interaction. And this is something Leslie has also really highlighted, how we live, how this network begins to live beyond the grant. So then the third piece of it is bring together intellectually diverse researchers to develop effective ways to communicate. So we'll explain how the activity brings us together. And obviously, just looking at the profiles of the members that are involved, we are incredibly diverse and we have a rich set of backgrounds and knowledges that we bring to this. And then explain how through that diversity and that engagement, we create new languages and open new research visas. And I think we could even add to that new policy domains, right? That we're trying to convey a different way that policy should be, normalizing a different kind of policy formation. And then finally, we conclude on how the convergent research team fosters new knowledge, tools, and networks. Tools, I think we need, to some extent, well, I'll write the first draft of this in discussion with my team members, but I might need to come back to the last group to really think about toolkits. That this is, I feel like this is really going to leverage some of the things Jean-Luc described and Sarah that you're working on in Miho, also Matt Bethel. So we'll come back to that, maybe even, Samantha, your work on thinking about toolkits, and then of course the network. So collaborate across academic research and education initiatives, communities, nonprofits, industry. And then this is the other piece where what you brought up today is so rich. So thank you, Chief Sherelle and Elder Rosina, and Courtney and Heidi for mentioning these governance frameworks, because this piece I highlighted in yellow because I'm a little less certain about this. And so I think thinking about our connection through this grant with the existing governing frameworks and policymakers is really important. And we'll rush on this in Massachusetts, but I'd like to see how we develop that. And then finally, how the activity improves predictions, technologies. Here we nail it again, policies and practices related to sustainability. So this is what we'll do when we meet on Monday or Tuesday. This team will flesh this out. I'm going to turn it over to you, Osamo. You're facilitating this group. And for partnerships and stakeholder engagements for impact, I was thinking Chris and Shirley, this is all about PAR. So with Elder Rosina, Matt, John Walkie, and then Joe, because of your work with communities, that this would be, quite easy for you as a team to flesh out. This has been your life's work. So Osama, do you want to say something about, I think you organized the outline for this section.
I'm sorry, I don't think that I did. I'm happy to convene this. I'm sorry, I think I lost track of this if I was supposed to do that this week.
Yeah, no worries. No worries, Osama. I know I've asked. You've had so many tasks. So absolutely, if you can go through, read through the materials and the solicitation on this and just do basically what I did for this section is an outline of what's required, and then convene the meeting early next week, Monday or Tuesday, so that your team will have time to work on it, and flesh out in that meeting the outline. And again, it doesn't have to be, I think your initial ideas, your intuitions are great. And what you send back can be, kind of an extended outline, something very reasonable, to a certain degree fleshed out that we can then build into writing, right? I can work with David, who's helps draft grants with LCU to turn this into prose. So happy to get that back. And also, Chris and Shirley, I know you have a tremendous amount of literature here to reference. So if you could even just signal, places, things that we need to reference in this section. And I know Sasha had mentioned she and David can help pull those references and put them into the grant. So does that sound good for this team? Is there anybody else that would want to be part of this team, or anyone else that would want to be somewhere else? No, okay. All right, so let's move on to the next section, which is diversity and culture of inclusion. And here Shaker is going to facilitate, and I think you've organized some notes. Do you want to say?
Yeah, it's on the next page, yeah. So can we go to the next place, please? Next page. Yeah, so
sorry, real quick, let me just, I'm sorry, I should have done this, but for membership, I was thinking Nathan and Amy could be, kind of leads here with Sean Luke. I'm not sure if Aaron would prefer to be in this group or in another group. Chief Cheryl, I wonder, would you want to join this group?
I don't think I can with my other responsibilities for the work we're doing on the hurricanes.
Okay, no worries. And Heidi, would you also be interested to join this work?
I think Heidi had to hop off.
Oh, she did. Okay. Well, I'll reach out over email and see. But otherwise, I think this is a good team to bring together on diversity of inclusion. Nathan, I know that you and Amy both have a lot of knowledge about the philosophy and the theory, and can maybe also reference the literature that can go into this. But Shaker, you've also done a lot of that work on environmental justice. So I'll turn this over to you to go through the outline, and let me scroll down.
Yes. Yeah, so there are two broad questions. If you look at the solicitation that we need to address, the first question is, what is our vision and plan to nurture a culture of inclusion? And the definition what NSF suggests of inclusion is, I think we need to scroll it.
Sorry, do you want me to scroll down?
Sure, that's fine, yeah. So this is, two broad questions that we need to address as part of this segment. First is, what is our vision and plan to nurture a culture of inclusion? And what NSF suggests is we need to describe in detail, that.
Here we go, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, so a culture of inclusion has many important aspects. They suggest that are essential for deep collaboration, including the participation of members from a diversity of scientific and engineering backgrounds and training, participants of members of groups traditionally underrepresented in STEM. So I think we have a lot of strength in the group to build on this aspect. And I've tried to write some of it maybe before the meeting next week. I'll write in more detail, and then we can discuss in the meeting to finalize. And so these are a couple of points I have written. What we are working on and how we are trying to bring in together the two streams of knowledges with regards to climate resilience. And in fact, I'm mentioning that this is one of our biggest strengths of our group. Jill, maybe we can go down and just see the next point. Yeah. And the second point is we need to outline how does the leadership team of the proposal effectively create an inclusion culture for the proposal in which all members feel valued and welcomed, creatively contribute, and gain mutual benefit from participating. So I'm explaining that how we are building on that, how this group has some shared values and commitments, and how we are building on individual expertise and strengths of individuals and communities. And beyond this project, we are also talking about long-term implications of the project, creating long-term network between, say, MIT and other organizations, especially bringing in scholars from native communities and those sort of things. So those are two important points that the proposal asks us to write in detail. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Shikar. So if you can also, convene your group
Yes.
Monday or Tuesday,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, I'll
work
send an email
together.
early morning on Monday, and then Monday, Tuesday, whenever it works for everyone, we'll do that. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then finally, Lizzie unfortunately had a practicum or meeting that she had to attend, but she's going to convene this group on additional considerations and cross-cutting themes. And here, Sarah, Miho, Samantha, are you happy to, is Samantha still on? Yeah, are you happy to be on this group as well?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Carolina and Courtney, and I thought that all of you have really exciting research that starts to bridge these cross-cutting themes. So NSF has 10 big ideas, and we want to touch on a few of those ideas. Convergence is one of them, but the other is like education and career pathways to help broaden participation in science and engineering. And so I think all of you have some really exciting tools and techniques that you've worked on that bridge this, potentially bringing Indigenous people into the STEM disciplines, and then also thinking about how traditional ecological knowledge better, or how we should bring STEM closer to traditional ecological knowledge. And so here also, if you can start to think a little bit about the toolkits of how you develop this, and maybe little things we can do within our pilots, that would be really useful to flesh this out. So I know that Lizzie will convene you on Monday or Tuesday to work through this, but maybe you can read through the outline and start giving it some thought. Does that sound good? Any thoughts from all of you on this?
And did Lizzie do the same thing where she just pulled out the important components of this already?
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is points 1, 2, and 3. These are the questions.
Okay.
And I think she has a couple initial thoughts here on what they are. And then you guys can build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is our goal for next week. So over the weekend, please do finish. I know you've already started them, the regional write-ups, and our student facilitators will help with that, of thinking about the pilot projects. I'll start to try to pull those together into a narrative, and maybe also start to work with David on that. And then if we can get our Massachusetts policymakers meeting sooner rather than later, hopefully as soon as possible, we can give more thought to kind of a coordinated effort to influence these governor's task force.
You see what I just found? You've got a state legislature climate change committee that was formed in August.
Okay.
So you're gonna have something there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We can look into that and find out more. Great.
Yeah, I think that's the Resilient Lands Initiative. Is that what you're referring to, Shirley?
No, it's called Senate Committee on Global Warming and Climate Change.
Oh, in the legislature.
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Okay.
Well, we won't have any legislators on the call unless we might be able to contact them.
I didn't mean that. I just meant that you've got the committee to work with, just like the others of us do,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Bob and Rishu will probably have a really good insight into the landscape of these initiatives as well, and how to connect them.
There's also a piece of legislation that's currently in motion around environmental justice, and it occurs to me that the Indigenous perspective in that is not all that strong. So that might be some place where we might want to put in a voice or lift up some voices that haven't been heard.
Absolutely. And you'll be in that meeting as well, John, right? Okay, terrific. All right. So, and then that hopefully by Friday of next week is our rough content all stitched in. Once we have all of the rough sections, I'll work with David over the course of the next week to try to draft this into a coherent narrative. And then this is due again on December 21st, MIT. So if we can send it to all of you again on the 18th to at least have a few days and go through and revise and change anything, then that's really useful. So I think that's the content piece of it. There's a few more, and also that, you know, there's this broader impacts, which what we'll do is just summarize. It's short, it's a page and a half. I think there are absolutely some really powerful impacts from this. And then references. I know that Sasha, you said you and David can help with this, but for those of you that have worked on the literatures in your subject area, adding, you know, identifying references that should be woven in and where they should be woven in is really helpful. And then Sasha, you had also said, I have a data management plan from another grant recently prepared, but I can send that to you. And I don't know if you and David can work on the data management for this. I imagine mostly what we're going to be, I don't know if we'll be collecting data. I guess that remains to be seen of the site itself. But I think that there's a lot of similarity based on what we've described to a prior data management plan I've done. So if you and I can send that to you, and if you and David can work on this piece.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can send it, and we're happy to help coordinate it, and I can get in touch with the PIs if there's specific details we need as pertains to their hubs.
Okay, great. And then do you want to go, Sasha, through the other pieces that we need?
Yeah. Actually, maybe do you mind scrolling up to the top of the document?
Oh, all the way to the top, okay.
Yeah. So I just added in here a couple extra things I want to highlight for anybody who is curious. Based on some of my conversations with Janelle and others this week. So we've set our PIs and our co-PIs, which is great. And then I had a conversation with Janelle about adding on all of the faculty. So that's assistant professor, associate professor level and up as senior personnel. If anybody does not wish to be noted as a senior personnel and provide the appropriate documentation, I would say you can let Janelle or I know. It's not a problem. Or if there's a conflict with another grant, then feel free to let us know. But I just sort of highlighted everybody who would serve in those roles at the top of the document. And then also I have a Dropbox link in here as well, which is open to everybody to see the various elements of the grant that are needed and what, so once those are available, they can be accessible there. And the other thing I'll mention is that some of the documents that will be needed by the senior personnel and co-PIs are already in those folders. So accessing links to the current and pending and things like that are already available in there. And I will, bug whoever needs to get me those by the time we need them. So don't worry about that as well. But then Janelle, if you want to go back down to where we were.
And just one point here, Sasha, that we can have up to 5 PI co-PIs. So one thought is that for University of Minnesota, does it make sense to have a University of Minnesota? Because we have 3 scholars from University of Minnesota to have a University of Minnesota PI as well.
Yeah, we could definitely have a PI if somebody would like to serve in that role. We wouldn't set up the sub-award role for them, but they could serve in that co-PI role.
I have something to say about that top page as well. Is it okay to speak now?
Yeah.
I think you should remove traditional ecological knowledges. This is a sustaining of the indigenous lifeways in their resilience. TEK is part of the lifeways. I don't think it needs to be focused, on. Rosina, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
So you see what I'm saying? I don't think this is to sustain TEK, it's to sustain the lifeways in which the TEK is.
It's already a part of it.
Yes. I take it out. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and any other changes, please do go in and just use the suggest function and type over this, you know, so because it is all rough, and we do welcome and appreciate your feedback. So thank you, Shirley. Yeah, so for the Minnesota team, maybe just give it some more thought amongst yourself. And I don't think it's necessary, but if one of you does want to be a PI, I don't know that it makes a difference. Just to let you know that it is a possibility. All right, so let's scroll down. Okay, to which section are we headed to, Sasha?
Sure. So after the keep going. I don't even remember anymore. Here we go. So yeah, we talked about data management plan. And so I'm working now to put together a list of the organizations and the project personnel who are part of this. If you can scroll down a little bit more, Janelle. And I've tried my best to capture everybody so far. So what I'm hoping to accomplish is we would like to name about 8 individuals. Sometimes I think Minnesota might be a little bit less, but 8 individuals or so who will travel to Boston as part of our team workshop that will be sort of in the middle of this grant opportunity. So I've pulled out who I think those individuals are, but if I'm missing anybody, first of all, I apologize. But I just want to confirm I have everybody's affiliation correct, and that everybody who has participated so far who we would like to include is included. So please feel free to either send me an email or add right directly into the document and let me know. But this is who I've gathered so far. So we need to be able to say, 8 people are traveling from Louisiana, 5 people are traveling from Minnesota, and then, however many people. I'm even getting down to the dollars and cents of how much does it cost to rent us some tables. So you'll see that the nature of the grant is specific in terms of what we need to, the information we need to gather, and I'm hoping to do that now. And I've spoken with all 3 teams at this point, and it sounds like we've agreed on some of the budgeting elements of this, whereby about half of the money will go to support some students to work with the faculty on these projects, and half of the funds can go toward either honoraria or directly to the tribes, however we want to, that gets sorted out for their work and participation in this. So that those are sort of equal amounts. And then there would be some funds for materials and services for any of the pilot programs there, and then the travel funds. So I'm working to coordinate all of the travel funds. And then I'm also have been in conversation with the Dillard and Fond du Lac colleges teams about getting all of that sorted and their needs and hopes from this application.
And so, Sasha, do we alphabetize these? Is there a way to kind of?
Oh, I can do that. This was just sort of my putting together emails and making sure I had everybody from the correct spots.
Yeah, thank you. And if we've mislisted also any names or organizations, please do feel free to go in and correct those.
I think Sherelle has left, but Junior Chief Devin Parfait is at Williams College, and I would certainly like to see him participate. It would be inexpensive and very positive to have him be part of this if you're actually going to geographically move people for this event. And I'd be certainly happy to give up my slot to Devin. He's a remarkable young man, and Sherelle is preparing him for leadership. Sherelle, are you still on?
Yes, Shirley, thank you. Okay, so here's something a lot of people do not know about me is I'm epileptic and I cannot fly. I'd like to, but I can't. So in an effort to not complicate things, right? And of course, to be able to save on some costs, because young Chief Devin is much closer by, and he is excellent at explaining the issues that, you know, we've been dealing with, all of the challenges. I mean, look, the ancestors chose that young man, I have no doubt. So I would like to put that to him, if that is acceptable to the rest of the team. And we can get him looped in to the conversation as well.
That would be terrific. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief Sherrill. And we're also, you know, beyond this grant, there's 2 or 3 internal MIT grants that are due at the same time. So we're going to apply for those as well. And if we got one of those, it would hopefully expand our budget, at least for the conferencing. You know, they're internal to MIT, so they're a little bit more restricted in what we can do with them. But I think we shouldn't feel like people are like, you know, that there's a limited number of spots if we can get some additional funding. So I don't think, you know, we should take names off to add names on. Is that right, Sasha? We can add more people. It's not it's not a guarantee that these people have to travel. It just.
Yeah, and I padded the MIT side a little bit in my initial calculations, not knowing what was going to happen with the numbers going in, and so you know, we can move things around in the travel side, no problem.
Okay. Great. All right, so that's the list, and then anything else? It's what the PIs.
Yeah, and I can bug everybody about these forms. There will be a set of forms. One thing I hadn't mentioned to anybody before is the last one, the COA document. It's an Excel chart everybody needs to fill in, who qualifies as a senior personnel. But I will plan next week to send around an email with the links and all of the information on this to the senior personnel next week.
Okay.
So the senior personnel, who and how many do we need per hub? Because that's something we didn't figure out today.
Oh yeah, so it's at the top of the document. We've already.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you.
So it's not a necessarily a need. We put more effort on our own end by adding more people, but you know, I think it demonstrates the depth and breadth of experience by the people who have been involved thus far by including everyone.
And okay, and then finally is the budgets, and I know you'll be working with the 2 subaward teams. And so the idea is, do you want to explain a little bit about how this works, Sasha, with the budget?
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of talked about sort of the main point of it, but you know, we're aiming to split the funds sort of. We've come up with a formula on the back end that takes into account the overhead rates of all 3 universities, and that means we get about, you know, $29,000-$30,000 per site, not including overhead. So the overhead's already been worked out for the students and for either some paid work or honoraria by members of the tribes, and that those amounts being equal, the university footing and the tribes, and then money for any pilot project work and the travel.
Great. So even there's a subawardee, I guess, which is the one university, and then that will support the.
So we determined that in order to maintain transparency as much as possible across sites, it made the most sense to be able to divide up the money by hub. Fond du Lac will be in charge of the pot of funds for Minnesota and the hiring of the students from that college, and then MIT the same, obviously, and Dillard University would also have the same setup. They could hire their own students and make their own payments and book their own travel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's everything, and I realize we're right at 5:30. So thank you so much. Let me stop the share and just check in if there's any final thoughts or questions from anyone. I'll summarize what we've discussed in our next steps and send out another email, and then we'll try to have one final meeting on Friday in a week, you know, just to make sure everything's in line.
maybe I could just add, Carolina, I wasn't sure about the nature of your appointment. And I wasn't sure if you would qualify as 9 months, and we can talk about this later. But if you would like to be, if you can be included as a senior personnel, that's fine too. I just wasn't sure because you're a research scientist, which way it went.
And you as well, Matt, I think, you know, the understanding the Sea Grant and how you work with NSF is helpful. So reach out to Sasha and she'll set that up.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. I'll get back with you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your engagement and staying on. It's nice to see all of you. It's exciting to have this coming together, and I think it is really promising. So I appreciate all of your hard work and looking forward to what comes next.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
you,
everybody.
everybody.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Let me save the chat.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Bye-bye.